And it is 11:30. I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Karen Solheim. I'm GAE retired secretary. And if you've been on a GAE meeting before, you know that this event is for GAE members and staff only. So if you're not a GAE member or a GAE staff, please sign in by putting your name and personal email, cell phone, and school system in the chat. And we appreciate your interest if you're a non-member and hope you'll join by visiting joingae.org. And everyone, if you intend to go through and use any of the recording or audio of this meeting, you do need to receive prior permission from the GAE Executive Committee or the GAE Executive Director. And lastly, social media posts concerning this meeting shall not contain information about the specific content of the meeting, although the sharing of general information about GAE and GAE events is encouraged. Please be courteous to other attendees and request their permission before posting photographs containing their images. And if you have any questions about social media posting of events, please contact the GAE Executive Committee or the GAE Executive Director. So I'm glad everyone is here. Sorry to have to get the business portion out of the way. Today, our Lunch Bunch program, as some of you may know, centers on Alzheimer's and the 10 warning signs. And Conrad is our featured program speaker today. And if you have clarifying questions in something that's being presented and you go, I've missed that, please ask as we go. But otherwise, if you could save your questions to the end about content, I think that'll make today be most meaningful for all of us. So again, so glad you're here. And Cloud, I am going to go through if it's okay, and you should be able to take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. I'll just make a couple of comments about my background, and then I'll share my screen and we'll go ahead with the program. I am a community educator. That's a volunteer position with the Alzheimer's Association, and I've been doing this work since 2019, or spring of 2019. I am also a support group facilitator for the Alzheimer's Association. It's a volunteer, and I am an advocate, helping our legislators locally and up in Washington understand the needs of those living with dementia and their caregivers, and working on policy that can support both of those groups of people. Excuse me. In addition to being a volunteer, I do this for a living. I am a dementia educator and am functioning as the executive director for Beyond Dementia Coalition, which is a nonprofit 501c3 headquartered in Gainesville, Georgia, that is primarily focused on reducing the stigma around dementia and helping everyone in the community understand how to assist, enable, support a person living with dementia to help those living with dementia feel more valued and beloved in the community. Feel like valued and beloved. It's not to say that they don't feel valued, but feel valued and beloved in the community. The topic of 10 warning signs is near and dear to my heart. There are several different presentations that I give for the Alzheimer's Association, and I think this is one of the most important ones. I think everyone needs to understand these 10 warning signs, and I'll explain why I mean that through the comments as I go through the material I'm about to share. I will say that we expect that the number of cases of dementia diagnosed dementia, which is a lower number than the number of cases of dementia, but the number of diagnosed cases is expected to double between now and somewhere between the years 2050 and 2060. So within the next generation. And the number one reason for that exponential growth in our population, our US population of those with dementia, is primarily because age is the number one risk factor for dementia. So as an audience that is um, gathered by virtue of the fact that you are all retired educators, this information I think will be very useful to you. Because of the doubling of dementia, I really believe that if everyone in our communities understood a little bit of something about dementia, then society would be better as a whole when you think about how many folks are going to be experiencing dementia in whatever stage of the disease. I think that that means not only dementia caregivers, professional and loved ones, but also the banker, the grocery bagger, the restaurant server. And so that is why I do the work that I do. Lastly, about myself, I am 3 times a dementia caregiver. First, my stepfather, and then my father, and now I live part-time with my mother to help her age in place with her. She's 90 years old and is in middle stage dementia. Okay, enough about me. It's more, now let's turn to the information that you came to hear, which is the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia. Please comment if you cannot see a title slide now. Am I successfully sharing? You should see an image of a woman in a
You are.
velour. Okay, great. In a robe. All right, 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. And before we get into that, which is really the meat of our conversation today, I need to share a little bit of backup information with you, just, sort of background stage setting. So let us talk about what is dementia, what is Alzheimer's disease, and why is it important for everyone to know the signs of dementia. Oops, clicked the wrong button. What is dementia? She's not talking. Dementia is an umbrella term for it's not all, it's cognitive changes that include loss of memory and loss of words and some other cognitive abilities. It's the umbrella term in the same way that cancer is an umbrella term. And within cancer, there are different forms like ovarian cancer or prostate cancer or brain cancer. So for dementia, the primary forms of dementia that we see are Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, and frontotemporal dementia. There are, I've heard reports anywhere from dozens to hundreds of forms of dementia. Alzheimer's is definitely the most common form of dementia, and it's responsible for approximately 70 to 75 percent of all dementia diagnoses. And for that reason, people often look at dementia and Alzheimer's synonymously. They're really not. Alzheimer's is a subset of dementia. What is Alzheimer's disease? I do not know why we don't have audio here. I will briefly make comments here. Alzheimer's disease, again, a form of dementia, is a degenerative disease. It's progressive in the sense that someone gradually loses various cognitive abilities, not just memory loss, however. Until in the end stages of dementia, they're even losing the cognitive abilities of gross motor function and fine motor skill. Dementia is a disease wherein amyloid plaques and tangles tend to scramble the neuronal network system in our brains and make it difficult for the different parts of the brain to communicate with each other, even at the cellular level, make it difficult for the brain to communicate cell to cell, and also make it more difficult for the brain to utilize nutrients that are delivered to the brain. I mentioned memory loss, and that's often the first sign that we see when someone's cognitive skills are changing as a result of dementia. However, we also typically will see some word loss. We'll typically see some difficulty with visual processing, and auditory processing, with linguistic skills, with locating the body in space, with problem solving. We'll talk about all these things. The point that I really want to make at the highest level here is that it's not just memory loss, but other cognitive changes that ultimately affect thinking and behavior, and even personality to some extent as the disease progresses. Dementia is eventually fatal. However, age being the number one risk factor for dementia, it's not uncommon that we would see that someone's age would take them before their dementia would. My father died, however, because of the changes in gross motor skills. He eventually lost the ability to swallow, aspirated on some food, and was deceased within 24 hours of that choking episode or aspiration episode. Let's see. Why is it important to know the signs? Well, I know that my video is not going to roll here, so I'm also going to speak extemporaneously here as well. We know that um, the earlier one's dementia is diagnosed, the more avenues are available to that individual in terms of treatment, in terms of services. And we also know that the sooner that dementia is recognized by the medical community, as well as, and I might say, and or the community surrounding, the care team around that person, then the sooner the family is able to help the individual plan for their estate wishes, plan for their advanced care wishes, plan for the bucket list wishes that they might still be able to complete. If dementia is diagnosed in the earliest stages, it really doesn't change very much about the individual's ability to function independently in daily life. These are important, though, these next two. If an individual would have to have a diagnosis of dementia in order to access any kind of drugs and treatments that are available for those living with dementia, whether they are aimed at symptoms or newest class of drugs out that's actually aimed at the pathologies of dementia. One would not be able to access those without a diagnosis. One would also not be able to participate in clinical trials without a dementia diagnosis. Dementia is a difficult topic. However, the not acknowledging of dementia does not change the progression of dementia. So although it is a very difficult topic, there are advantages to, it's easy to say it from the ivory tower, so to speak, but there are advantages to addressing these early on. Okay, so I've told you all about why we need to hear this information. Let's get on with it. 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia. I'll list them out for you now, and we'll go through each of these and I'll give you some detail. Memory loss that disrupts daily life. And this is something that we've alluded to already here, and it's listed as number one because we typically see memory loss as the earliest sign of dementia. Challenges in planning or problem solving, difficulty completing familiar tasks, confusion with time or place or navigating to familiar places, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships, new problems with words and speaking or writing. That's the linguistic piece of it. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps, which has to do with memory loss. Decreased or poor judgment, withdrawal from work or social activities, and changes in mood and personality. Now, some of the earliest signs of dementia are also signs of normal aging. And you may be wondering, as you have maybe a senior moment, gosh, does this mean I have dementia? What is my cognitive health? What are my chances? And I'm going to say three things to you that hopefully will help you to sort through whether changes that you observe in yourself or someone else are normal aging or something that maybe deserves a little bit of attention. Those three things are Does the person have the ability to recover from a lapse, like a senior moment? You are standing in the grocery store line, and you know the woman behind you. She is a neighbor down the street. You can think about the last conversation you had with her, the last time you saw her, even maybe the last outfit that she was wearing when you saw her, but you cannot come up with her name. You're driving home from the grocery store, and all of a sudden you remember her name was Gladys. Why could I not remember that? You recovered from that loss, therefore senior moment. If it is something different from before, or different for you, if it's a behavioral change, or a situational change, I'll explain what I mean, that is different from before for you, then it might be cause for concern. So if I have always been meticulous in my housekeeping, keep a very tidy home, no speck of dust anywhere, and all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, but gradually, things are building up in my house, like mail that I haven't read, or clothes that I've worn, but maybe I could wear again. But instead of rehanging them in my closet, I pile them up on a chair. If the magazines are piling up, on the dining room table, or things of that nature, that is not fastidious housekeeping. It is different from before and different for me. So that might be cause for concern. And then the third one is, what is the third one? I always get to this point and pause. Hopefully I'll recover. We talked about ability to recover. Oh, I know what it is. See, I recovered. Right. Ability to recover, different from before, different for that person. And is it happening? Number three, is it happening so often that it's affecting daily life? If I couldn't come up with Gladys's name, and then I couldn't remember what I was supposed to pull out of the refrigerator, and then I couldn't pull a word out that I was trying to use to convey something to you, all in the course of a short period of time, then it would be happening so often that it was affecting daily life. So those three things, use those three lenses or filters, so to speak, when you are wondering, does this mean I'm seeing a cognitive change that might signal dementia? Let me back up before I go forward. However, there's one more thing I want to say about the detection route, early detection, early diagnosis. And I use the word diagnosis with you, but when I'm counseling clients or teaching a class, I talk about the word detection. And I've learned this from some of the uh, researchers down at the Emory University School of Medicine, or I've inferred it from information that they've said to me. And the reason why I say it is there are also symptoms of other diseases that are the same as symptoms of dementia. Well, you could be thinking that you could be noticing something in yourself, and you don't want to do anything about it, because doing anything about it would signal, ooh, it might be dementia. It might be some other disease. And if you don't address it, you will never know that it might not be dementia. Not only will you never know that and continue to worry, what if it's dementia, but you also won't be availing, making, creating a pathway to any kind of therapies that would help you overcome whatever it was, the medical condition that was showing you symptoms that were potentially symptoms of dementia. So this is another reason to seek, explore it medically, take a path of detection. Don't look at it as a path of diagnosis, but a path of detection, because it could be something else that's treatable. Okay, now the meat of the matter. Let's start with number one, memory loss that disrupts daily life. What does this mean? Forgetting important dates or events, or asking the same questions over and over, or relying on memory aids, or family members to help remember things. Now, last time I went to the dentist, I wanted to remember, I had a lot of things going on, and I wanted to be sure that I remembered it. So the night before my appointment, I put a little post-it on the alarm keypad, dentist appointment at 3. And I was able to successfully remember the next day that I had a dentist appointment at 3, and get there in spite of all the other things that would be going on in my life on that particular day. If I had a post-it on my bathroom mirror, and if I had a pop-up on my phone, and a post-it on the refrigerator, and a post-it on the steering wheel of the car, that might be a different matter. And if I'm using those kinds of memory aids in that way as a crutch rather than a safety net, like the one posted on the security pad, the alarm system, then that might be a sign that that something more serious than normal aging is going on. I might not have put the post-it on the on well, whether or not I put the post-it on the security panel. I'm going about my day. I've got meetings, got to get some groceries at lunch, some other errands, blah blah, and it's not on my mind that I have a dentist appointment at 3. The post-it, it worked in the moment, but it didn't really stick. It's not on my mind. But all of a sudden, I'm driving around and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, running my errands at lunchtime. Oh my gosh, I haven't done this appointment at 3. I recovered from a senior lapse, so it was normal aging. If I'd not realized that the dentist appointment was yesterday at 3, then that might be signs of concern. Challenges in planning or problem solving. So I'm not going to run the video because I don't think that you're going to hear the sound. What John would tell you, though, if the video was going to play the sound, is that, and John's probably my age, he's probably 63. He says so he's been calculating the tip at a restaurant for the server since probably he was 20 years old. He's been doing that for over 40 years. And he says, now I can't calculate a simple tip. Also, trouble following a familiar recipe or keeping track of monthly bills. These are signaling changes in the frontotemporal region of the brain where we conduct our executive function. We make decisions, we look at data, we analyze information, we make plans, we execute plans. If I am a salesperson, on a monthly basis, I have to create a sales report for my boss. That's a familiar task. Now, the data each month is going to change, but the creation of the sales report is a familiar task. I've been doing it for 20 years. It takes me about an hour and 15 minutes. If I notice that creating that sales report every month is taking me 3 hours, 4 hours, 4 or 5 times longer than what it typically has taken me, what it used to take me, that might be sign for concern. If I bounce a check every now and again, it's not good, but it doesn't necessarily mean I have a cognitive problem. If I am notorious for bouncing checks and I bounce a check, no change. It's not different from before. It's not different from me. So hopefully that helps you understand these things. A familiar recipe, cornbread. My mother makes cornbread. She makes it from scratch. She's done that ever since I was a kid. Never looks at a recipe, just pulls the ingredients out, measures them in her hand, doesn't use a measuring cup or a measuring spoon. Now she's forgotten the salt. Now she's forgotten the lard. Now she's forgotten to turn on the oven. That would be trouble signaling potential cognitive change because it's a familiar action and a familiar recipe, a rote task, if you will. She can't do that any longer. Number 3, difficulty completing familiar tasks. And this does tail in with problem solving that we just discussed a minute ago. So some other examples would be driving to a familiar location. Now that one's interesting because driving to a familiar location, it does involve sequencing, which is a task that we do in our frontal lobe with executive function. Sequencing is part of executive function, but also it involves navigation. Navigation comes from the hippocampus. The hippocampus is where new memories are formed and new learning occurs. So some of these are mixed, different mixed changes in cognitive skills. Organizing a grocery list. This is thinking ahead. It's planning ahead. It is making a sequence. And it is also calling upon words, an object in mind and the name of that object together and putting them on a list, mostly executive function there. Remembering the rules of a favorite game. Now, we just had a time change last weekend. We got an extra hour. Yay, it was fun. I loved sleeping in with my extra hour. I had to go and change the clock on the oven, on the microwave, in my bedroom. If I have difficulty resetting the clock after a time change, something that I do every 6 months, and I need to pull out the manual to do it, normal. This is not a familiar task. However, if it was something that I did on a daily basis for whatever reason, and I now had to pull the manual out in order to complete those steps, that might be sign of something more severe going on cognitively than normal aging. Confusion with time or place. So this is also something that comes from the hippocampus. The hippocampus is new memories, new learning, short-term recall, that sort of thing. Navigation, as we just mentioned a minute ago, the ability to get oneself from here to another place that we can't see, or maybe even we can see. And then also a sense of time and place. So if an individual is having trouble understanding something, if it's not happening immediately, that might be a signal of a cognitive change that deserves a detection path. For example, when are we going to the dentist? When are we going to the dentist? When are we going to the dentist? You'll hear this from dementia caregivers. They say, I've learned not to tell my loved one, my mother, about the dentist appointment until it's time to put on our coats and go. Excuse me, because my mother, in this loss of ability to understand concepts of time and place, and also understand abstract concepts, which comes from the frontal lobe. Abstract, I can't touch it. It's happening in the future, so therefore it's abstract. Now I forgot how I was going to end that sentence. Uh, anyway, that why we get that question, when are we going to the dentist, when are we going to the dentist, having to do with challenges to the hippocampus for sense of time and place, and challenges in abstract thinking about understanding the future. Forgetting where they are or how they got there. The elevator door opens on the floor where the dentist office is, and your loved one says, "Where are we?" And it's a place that your loved one has been coming for years and years, every 6 months or every 4 months. That would be an example of probable changes to the hippocampus as a result of possible changes to the hippocampus as a result of cognitive changes signaling dementia. You might be at the grocery store and you're writing a check for your groceries, which is unlikely in this day and age, but bear with me here for my story. You're filling out your check and on the date line, you don't know what to put. Let's see, what is today? What is today? What is today? There was a dentist appointment yesterday on November 5th. So today is the 6th, and you write out your check and off you go. If you were able to solve that problem, you were able to sort of back into the answer there. And so that was a recovery from a lapse, so to speak. But if you weren't able to solve that problem to back into that somehow, then that might signal a cognitive change. Trouble understanding visual and images and spatial relationships. So there are interesting changes that happen visually if a person has dementia and they have nothing to do with, or they cannot be solved through vision correction, eyeglasses, contact lenses, surgeries. Some of these changes, it's not the data coming in, it's not the eyeball, it's not the act of seeing, it's the act of processing that visual data that comes in. The processing of that visual data occurs in the occipital lobe, and that is actually in the back of the head. Like if you know where the everybody's head is shaped differently, but generally speaking, in the back of your head, there's sort of a point, there's a not pointy point, but there's an area that protrudes over your neck. That is really where the occipital lobe is located, roughly speaking, on the other side of your head from your actual eyeballs. So that data has to travel from the eyes all the way back to the back of the head and then get processed. Remember what we talked about the neuronal connectivity, the neuronal network system. If dementia is in play, then it is harder for the brain to send the information from the eyeballs to the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is in charge of detecting form and motion and color and depth. And if visual processing is changed by dementia, that's what might make it harder for a person to recognize your face, to recognize their keys on the counter, to distinguish the toothbrush from the hairbrush. It's also if the occipital lobe is damaged and that depth perception piece problem exists, then it's going to create problems with balance. It's going to create problems with coordination. It's going to create problems judging distance. And also if, detecting form and motion is compromised by changes in the occipital lobe, it's going to be harder while driving to see a car coming across the street in front of your path. It's going to be harder seeing a car trying to turn left in front of you. It's going to be harder to see a red stop sign if it's standing in front of a huge shrub behind it. So driving is a very important conversation when dementia is the main topic. I also want to mention here, and it relates to depth perception, but it's more than that, that it's natural as we age that we lose some of our peripheral vision, our ability to see on the sides. As we age, our peripheral vision will constrict to some degree, but only a finite amount. For a person living with dementia, that restriction of peripheral vision continues, shrinking down until eventually it's as if a person is looking through a monocle. And as you do that, like please make, if you are able, like binoculars in front of your eyes, just with your hands. Notice when you do that, that you can't see what's happening on your left or your right. You can't see your feet. You can't see the ceiling. And then shrink that down, cover one eye, and go down to a monocle, and it's even worse. So for a person living with dementia, they are oftentimes unaware of things that are in their surroundings. You might be standing beside them and they may not know that you have just come up and stood beside them. If you reach out your arm and put it on their shoulder and they're not aware of your presence because their peripheral vision has shrunken down to tunnel vision, you could scare the living daylights out of them. Because of the changes in peripheral vision, when you think about when you drive in your car and we talk about, visibility and blind spots and all of that, imagine if you were driving your car and you had those binoculars on. You wouldn't be able to see cars approaching you in the fast lane to pass you, or as it is these days, they're passing in the slow lane around you as you're putting down 85 in the middle lane. But anyway, so problems processing visual information and also spatial relationships. Number 6, problems with words in speaking or writing. And Phil talks here about, Phil is a writer by trade. I think he was a columnist for a paper, so he wrote for a living. But in this video, he will tell you that he would have trouble coming up with words, phrases, people's names, and this is something that he did for a living. I know through my training, and I see it in my own experiences caring for others living with dementia, that vocabulary shrinks through dementia. In early stage dementia, a person still has probably 20, 30,000 words to call from, just as you and I have 20 or 30,000 words in our vocabulary. You may even have more. As an educator. As a person's dementia progresses, we typically see that in the early stages, no change in vocabulary. By late stage dementia, a person may only be using 6 or 12 words out of all of those thousands and thousands of words. That's how significant the change in vocabulary may be. In addition to vocabulary itself, linguistically, a person with dementia usually uses the ability to process someone else's speech. They also usually lose the ability over time and gradually to produce speech themselves, to communicate with others, making conversation very difficult as someone's dementia progresses. In comprehending other people's speech, if in early stage dementia, just as you and I can comprehend 4 out of every 4 words that a person says, as dementia progresses, that will be 3 out of 4 words, 2 out of 4 words, and then eventually 1 out of every 4 words that someone says. This doesn't happen across the board, nor do any of these changes that we've talked about, but these are things that we would expect to see as a result of the changes that we know dementia brings. We might also see, in terms of linguistic, that people repeat themselves. They call more on the words that are left in their arsenal, in the vocabulary chest, so to speak. And they also tend to repeat themselves as a result of not remembering what they've just said. Now, you and I, Gladys, when we talked about the grocery store, that could be either be Gladys's face that I wasn't remembering, I had the lapse over, or Gladys's name. In that case, it was Gladys's name. I did know the woman, but I couldn't come up with her name. And so trouble finding the right word. If we are communicating with a person who has dementia, it's important to know and remember, even though they may have all the vocabulary, they're still not comprehending a certain number of the words that I'm saying. We may expect to repeat ourselves. We may expect that we should pause and allow the person what might seem like an extraordinarily long amount of time to comprehend what they've said and then compose their response to it. We might expect that we might have to, having repeated ourselves, once, to help the person get more of the 4 words that we said, that we might have to reiterate something another way in hopes that expressing it differently after repeating it verbatim would maybe draw in a new vocabulary word that the person could understand. Also, very important that we use our visual skills as we communicate, because we know through the work of Albert Morabian that the visual cues are the most important part of comprehension in communication. So using your facial expressions, using gesture and mime, and also using your vocal intonation to help with comprehension. Next sign, number 7, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. I bet you have misplaced your phone, your keys, your wallet, or something else that was important and inconvenient in the last week. That's normal aging. But I also bet that you had the ability to retrace your steps and say, let's see, the last time I had my keys was, and you can retrace your steps and locate whatever the missing item was. A person with dementia is usually not able to back it out and retrace their steps and retrieve the item that is misplaced. When part of this is a person has misplaced their keys, or they're worried about their money because for some reason money becomes a cause for anxiety. Well, there are reasons, but I won't get into them. But people become more and more anxious about money. So the wallet goes in a safe place. And then the person, because of changes in the hippocampus, can't remember the safe place. And when this happens over and over and over and over, the frustration, probably coupled with some changes in reasoning that happen in the frontal lobe, a person oftentimes will arrive at the place where they conclude that the object missing is the result of someone having stolen it from them. I just went through this with my mother. Home health aide comes. She's the only new person in the house. Mom is very deep into embroidery, and she has put her purple threads for the project that she's working on now in a new little fancy bag that she got in a gift box that came to us recently. And she'd forgotten that she moved the purple threads from the place that she had been storing them to this fancy little box that in fact sat on the table where she does her embroidery. And her conclusion was, Katrina is the only new person in the house, therefore Katrina has stolen those purple threads, and therefore Katrina is never coming back into this house again. This is not uncommon. I was able to find the threads and then talk her down from Katrina as thief. But this is not uncommon at all. This is something that lots of dementia caregivers would tell you that they've experienced, and you might know this yourself. So you and I can retrace the objects when they're misplaced. Number 8, decreased or poor judgment. So I've kind of given some of these examples. The example that I gave about the fastidious housekeeping and all of a sudden not so fast or progressively less fastidious over time. I believe that when that is the case, that part of what's happening has to do with decision making. Is this jacket clean enough that I can wear it again, or is it time for it to go to the dry cleaners? Do I want to keep this magazine? Do I want to give it to a friend? Do I want to donate it to the library, or do I want to recycle it? What shall I do with this piece of junk mail? That sort of thing, that those decisions and then the steps involved in getting the magazines into the pile for the friend or what have you, those sequencing aspects and the decisions around it, all from the frontotemporal lobe, where we make decisions, we plan, we sequence, and we weigh consequences. These are signs of decreased or poor judgment. That fastidiousness, the inability to clear up clutter anymore, changes and the sequencing around that. I'll also mention here grooming, dressing, in addition to keeping one's environment clean, keeping up with the mail, sorting through the embroidery materials, and collecting or categorizing threads by color. All things that happen in the frontotemporal lobe. So sequencing of tasks, grooming and dressing. There are a lot of steps involved in brushing one's teeth. Tonight, when you brush your teeth, count them up. You find the toothpaste tube, you find the toothbrush, you unscrew the cap of the tube, you put the toothpaste on the brush, you put a little water on the brush. My dentist tells me you're not supposed to do that, but I still do it anyway. You brush up and down this quadrant, all those steps, count them up. That's a lot for a person living with dementia who has changes in their frontal lobe as a result of the dementia. That's a lot of steps for them to remember. Same thing with dressing. In the case of dressing, we might also see that someone's buttons are not fully buttoned, or their button catty askew or crooked, or a person has their undershirt on outside their outer shirt. This has to do with sequencing of tasks, and also it may have to do with manual dexterity issues. If a person's living with dementia, in about middle stage dementia, they are probably going to start noticing problems with buttons, with snaps and hooks and neckties and shoelaces and belts. Manual dexterity changes may become compromised as a result of dementia. Now, that's off the subject from decreased or poor judgment, but it's a good example of how these changes that we notice could be the overlap of multiple changes as a result of dementia. Withdraw from work or social activities. If a person is having the changes that we've talked about, I'm having trouble recognizing faces. I don't have my full vocabulary any longer. The person's not consciously saying these things, but I'm not receiving all four of the four words that someone else says to me. I can't remember what was just said, so I can't respond appropriately. Then it makes it harder for a person to engage in social activities, and for a variety of reasons, including but not limited to, I don't want other people to know. It's too frustrating for me to be in this situation, or it's too tiring for me to compensate for these changes. People often withdraw from their social activities. So if we see that a person used to play a round of golf, on a weekly basis, and now they're not doing it so much anymore, might be because they're having trouble scoring. And, that's what happened to my stepfather. He was embarrassed about the scoring of golf. Golf is usually a game where people are pretty fastidious about the score. So he stopped playing, those rounds of golf anymore. That social withdrawal can look very different. My dad, who had always been the life of the party before dementia, would still come to the party, but he would go stand in the corner and pull one person aside to have a conversation with them. So people have different ways of compensating or coping. They might not be consciously compensating or coping with those changes, I should say. But we should expect that social withdrawal would present at some point in one's progression from dementia. And then the last sign, and then I want to ask for questions here. Changes in mood and personality. And these are often a result of a combination of loss. If you think about, our most basal and one of the earliest instincts or cognitive skills that we develop as a human is our survival instincts. And they stay with us until the end of our days. It's like the earliest skill we build and the last skill that we lose as we age, whether it's normal aging or dementia. So the survival instinct is still strong, and yet a person, because of their visual changes, their auditory changes, their motor skill changes, their ability to make decisions. What should I do when I'm attacked, by the thug in the alley? Or it's a bad example. Forgive me for that. If a person is unable to defend themselves in the way that they once did from threats, real or perceived, literal or figurative, they are going to become anxious. And anxious kind of becomes, in my view, a default mode or mood for the person living with dementia. And that anxiety can change a person's personality, not necessarily permanently, but and we'll see a different mom, for example, show up as stressors increase as a result of real or perceived threats, or even physical discomforts. So we can expect that we would see these changes. And it's not that our person wants to be difficult. Someone said to me, it was a client said to me, people living with dementia are manipulative. No, they're not. And they're not trying to be difficult, but they're only using the skills that they still have left, or the patterns or the other coping mechanisms that they still have left in order to attempt to succeed with the activities of daily living. Okay, with that, I want to close out, to stop sharing, and not really seeing how I'm supposed to do that because of the way that I've created my settings. I am happy to stop being the host, since I can't figure out how to stop sharing.
Let me see if I click on replace current share and see if that'll stop you.
Okay. The stop share button is under the meeting is being recorded button. So I can't, oh wait, maybe if I just click, here we go, stop share. All right. So thank you. All right, that was a lot of information, and I'm just wondering, we have a good amount of time left for Q&A, how I can help you synthesize what you just got through the fire hose there.
Well, my question is, it's not linear as the way you present, like first the person will do this and then step two. I mean, this is going to come in all different, is it not true that it'll come in all different configurations, and it's not, oh, she's on sign number 4, she'll move to sign number 5 next.
Brilliant. Yes, I'm so glad that you mentioned this. It is not a foregone conclusion that everyone would see all of the 10 warning signs that we just talked about. It is everyone's case of dementia is as individual as their pinky print, I say. Also, I want to, along with that, that comment, that your progression of dementia in this difference in the individuality of it, not your progression, one's progression, it doesn't move monolithically. We talked about the vocabulary. You still might have 25,000 words at your disposal, but your tunnel vision is extremely severe for where you are in the progression of dementia, or you have difficulty dressing. However, you can still talk about abstract topics. It doesn't move monolithically. We talk about early stage, middle stage, and late stage dementia. You could be early stage with some skills and middle stage with other skills. And also, along with that is that some people rebound. You know, they have better days than worse days, or they have better weeks than worse weeks. It's not, while it is a progression and it is degenerative, people still have little fluctuations within whatever stage they are, depending on a variety of variables, including their sleep, their nutrition, the surroundings, you know, the stimuli around them, etc.
Thanks. Patrick, what's your question?
It's a comment kind of question.
Okay.
One thing I noticed my dad when he had Alzheimer's, and this was amazing because we watched him over 10 years, we could see the digression go down and down and down. But he was so amazing when he was around relatives. It was like he knew them, but he couldn't call their names or anything. But they thought there's nothing wrong with him. But we could see those subtle things that going on. And is that common?
Yes, it's very common. A couple of reasons for that. One is we didn't really talk about this with linguistic skills. A person's ability to engage effectively in social chit chat remains very, very strong. And so the people that don't see the person with dementia that didn't see your dad on a daily basis, they would get the social chit chat version of dad. Whereas if you spent more than 45 minutes, or I don't know what the time period was, with dad, you would see, you know, some other changes. The other reason why he might have functioned very effectively in those family gatherings was, even though he couldn't maybe necessarily say a sibling's name or a cousin's name, these were familiar people, and they could have conversations about familiar things, specifically memories of the past. And so that may be why, to the outside world, either the social chit chat or the familiarity of kin could make it appear to others that he wasn't experiencing dementia to the degree, or if at all, but to the degree that you knew, in fact, he was.
It's amazing how the mind works, even with Alzheimer's, that you could mask that so well.
That you can mask that so well. Let me make another comment about this as well. Going with the social chit chat, um, you might have heard stories about the um, the saxophonist who had dementia, and he couldn't tell you what he had for lunch, but if you put the sax in his hand and you got him on the bandstand with other musicians, he could play, I don't know, String of Pearls just as well as anyone else, and his solo was just fine. And this goes with social chit chat because there's a linguistic side, you know, of auditory stuff, and then there's the sonic side of it. And the social chit chat is has to do with rhythm, and music has to do with rhythm. And we know that rhythm is, I mean, or sorry, music is such a great therapeutic tool for dementia, but people can succeed with activities or stimuli that involves rhythm, sonic, you know, sonic data and rhythmic data for a very long period of time. And that's why music is so valuable as a therapeutic tool. I'll encourage you to Google this if you haven't seen it. It was floating around social media a long time ago. Let me see, what should you Google? Ballerina, 80-year-old ballerina, um, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. And you will see a YouTube video, or search in YouTube, not just Google, search in YouTube for that. You will come upon a video where I think the ballerina is dressed in black and white, and she's sitting in a wheelchair, and she's virtually catatonic at the beginning of the video. And you'll see what happens when the ballerina, the octogenarian ballerina in the wheelchair, hears Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. And it's a beautiful, I encourage you to go search YouTube for that. It's a beautiful demonstration of how a person's ability to appreciate rhythmic data does not diminish in dementia, even in late stage dementia.
We might have time for one more question.
I have a question. As a caregiver, both of my parents, who are not together, but they are both displaying some signs of dementia. And one of the things that they both in separate conversations have shared is that when people say things like, "You already told me that," is kind of a trigger. It makes them frustrated or angry, because I think, you know, they're aware that there are some cognitive changes. But as a caregiver, what is the best way to deal with that?
The best way to deal with that would be, I think, and thank you for the question, to find a way to pull that person aside and without appearing corrective. And as a teacher, as a former educator, I know you'll know how to navigate that, but without appearing corrective, to point out, my mom is doing the best that she can. She has some challenges with short-term memory. She genuinely cannot remember that she just said that. Please try to act as if it's the first time you're hearing that information. She's just trying to have a conversation with you.
Cloud, I want to thank you so much for your sharing today. I feel like my brain is exploding, which is good to have all those thoughts going on, but so much to be mindful of in dealing with how we deal with others and in dealing with ourselves. So thank you so much for sharing today.
You're welcome.
you
You're
being
so welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. And I know I opened a door, and I probably created many more questions that you have not necessarily not answered, but go to alz.org if you want to find more information. I'm so proud of the information, the depth and breadth of information that's available on the alz.org website. That's the Alzheimer's Association's website. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Before we close in just a few minutes, I just want to share some information that was in the new Loop newsletter that came out yesterday. We haven't said this enough to our membership. If you are on a Medicare Advantage plan and you have not elected your coverage for this year, if you do not do that, you will be defaulted to the Anthem plan, which is the lowest cost plan. So it's very important that you go through and take an active enrollment role in Medicare Advantage for this year. I'm going to scroll through. We do have some district meetings coming up next week. All GAE members, any district meeting, please, again, just click on the links in the loop for that. We've gone through the voting. GAE-Retired will have its business meeting this Friday, starting at 11 a.m. If you are a GAE-Retired member, you are more than welcome to be a part of this business meeting. Thereafter, our GAE Board of Directors is meeting on Friday night and Saturday morning, and we're represented by Vivian Brooks, who was on this call, and Sandra Hawthorne and Brenda Montgomery are our three at-large GAE-Retired members on the GAE Board of Directors. American Education Week is coming up the week before Thanksgiving. If you are interested in being on the GAE board, you can nominate yourself through November 15th. You can get somebody to nominate you. We'll have an open position. And then also the Fund for Public Education, GAE-Retired members can apply for this also and nominate themselves. And you'll see there are openings in District 2, 3, and 4. If you don't know what district you're in, there is a link here to make sure you know what district you currently reside in. Maybe applicable at this point in time, if there is fire in your belly from the election yesterday and the results. There is training in case you want to run for an educator to an elected position to public office. And you can see there are several trainings that will be coming up across the country. And there's the application deadline just a little bit before Thanksgiving. We will have a TRS board meeting at the end of the month. You are welcome to Zoom in for that. And last but not least, for this year, we will have our former interim GAE executive director, Peggy Cochran, be the speaker for the next GAE-Retired lunch bunch in December. And I think that Peggy will do a good job of getting us fired up and ready to go as we start our work in January with the General Assembly and then working in the midterm elections. Last two, and I'll close this out. We will have our Lobby and Learn event again by Zoom in January. And then we will have another business meeting in January. And finally, we will have our virtual day at the Capitol. And the very last thing I will say, GAE-Retired, we will have a pre-retirement seminar for members and non-members. Two more coming up in January and March. Please share this information. It's now 12:31. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. You should have my email via this Zoom meeting. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for everything you are doing and have done for public education and as a retired member. So look forward to seeing you next time. And again, thank you for being a GAE-Retired member. Bye-bye.